It's time to talk Bengals offseason and free agency with the one, the only Joe Goodberry. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien of allbengals.com and Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And if you're not following Joe on Twitter at Joe Goodberry, well, you're missing out. And if you're not on Twitter, well, create a Twitter and make sure you follow him because he brings you a ton of good football thoughts, Bengals opinions, and so much more. And we're going to talk over the next few minutes about the offensive line, about free agency, about different positions the Bengals need to address. And so, Joe, let's start there. Let's start with the offensive line. All eyes are on free agency, the draft this offseason to improve the Bengals' clear weakness, the reason they were unable to win in Super Bowl 56 and become world champions. I think it's pretty clear it was the offensive line. Where do you think they start? Where do you think they end? What do you think their offseason strategy is going to be? Because you know their patterns, you know what they do, you know, you have a good grasp of their mindset. How do you think they're going to try to fix this problem this offseason?
You know, I'm glad you brought up the patterns because that was the first thing I looked at when the Super Bowl concluded and, you know, we were recovering emotionally from that season and that game. But I looked at the patterns of who they've drafted lately. And yeah, we're going back all the way to 2015, really, because I think they're still feeling the effects of that Ian Fisher draft because, I mean, Whitworth and Zeitler were let go 2 years later with the hopes that those guys could be solid starters. And obviously the one move, maybe both moves, probably bites them in the butt a little bit there in the Super Bowl game. But that's not the point. So looking at the trends, what I saw was, and I think when you talked to Frank Pollock yesterday, I think he validated what I saw in their trends, which were they have continually drafted average-sized, average athlete prospects on the offensive line. And that's being generous in a few of those because they've drafted some poor athletes, guys like Trey Hill. They've drafted some guys that are undersized and like Billy Price, who didn't have the length, and he never ended up testing, which is another issue they've had drafting. Guys like Cedric Ogbuehi never tested. Billy Price never tested. Jackson Carman never tested. And so, like, you may see these guys on tape and you may say they are good enough athletes to do the job at the NFL level, but without the confirmation that they are with the testing, and which is a big week here. We're on NFL Scouting Combine week, and people wonder the importance of it at times. That is the importance, is to put the stamp, the final seal of what you saw on tape is actually what this guy is. So some of the trends that I've seen is that they really don't have, and before Frank Pollock said glass eaters, I was saying they need to get some daddies on this offensive line. They need some big guys. They need some strong guys. They need some athletic guys with some length. So hearing Frank Pollock say they want some tough, nasty dudes that can move, climb to the second level, had some athleticism, had the length, I think we're on the same page here. They need to look for guys that add some power and some athleticism to this unit, because I think it's a big conversation as well, too, because not to go too long on that, but I think it also points to the last 2 years they've had the issues with the COVID season and the shortened off seasons. If you're drafting guys that aren't winning because of their athleticism, they're not winning because of their size and strength and length. They need to win because of their intelligence, because of their preparedness, because of their technique. And if you don't have the hands-on coaching time that you normally would have, those guys are going to lack in those areas. So it makes a lot of sense to me why the picks they have made over the last few years really haven't helped this team. And I think that's where I'd start when looking at future replacements.
And let's dive into it, because to me, yeah, they can draft athletic guys and they could kind of change the mold and look that way in the draft. But this isn't a rebuilding team anymore. And they, in their minds, and they've at least said it, the win now mode and all of those things, and they've been aggressive in free agency the past couple of years on defense. And, well, it's worked out. The defense was really, really good in 2021. I think everybody agrees that they need to be aggressive in free agency from an offensive line standpoint. At the same time, and Duke Tobin talked about this, I wrote about it on All Bengals this week and posted some video here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk of Tobin. I don't think they're necessarily going to flock to, Terron Armstead or Brandon Scherff, or, these huge names that are 30 years old. They're my age, right? And you're saying, all right, obviously, if you could get them to block for Joe Burrow, that's great, but there's injury history. It's huge money. And the guys they've paid the past couple of years are in their primes. DJ Reader was in his prime. Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, Cheeto Awuzie, like all these guys, Mike Hilton, they're on their second contracts, not necessarily looking for their third contract. And I think that matters because a lot of these veteran offensive linemen that people are naming, and Armstead, Scherff, we could go down the list, Ryan Jensen, and we just go down the list. A lot of these guys are on their third contracts. They're on the wrong side of 30. So free agency wise, do you expect them to swim in that pool? And if not, how do you think they address it? Because I think we all agree. I think they agree that they need to get some proven linemen in the building.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the age being a big factor. It always has been based on their history. I would say, though, the thing about spending on a big guy like Armstead, which I think would be tremendous. Everyone would be for it if they went out and had that plan and wanted to go get one of the better left tackles in the league. The issue there is they probably need 4. They may see it as 4 new guys on this offensive line. At least it's 3. And it's hard to spend that $18 million on one guy. You look at how they handled corner last year. Do you want to spend that money, that $15-16 million on William Jackson, or do you want to split that up between 2 guys that can give you similar production, if not better, if they fit the scheme better? And so I can see that same method working on the offensive line. Why go get a new big left tackle, a lot of money there, when you can go get 2 guards for that price, a right tackle and a guard, right tackle and a center for about the same price as you would spend on one guy. So I see that definitely. The other parts of the age thing, because they never really have signed these guys unless it's like a 1-year deal, guys that are 30 plus, the window is different than ever, right? The window of being in that position, being so close, it may make you make different moves. It may make you say, I don't care if this guy's 31, like a Ryan Jensen. You could get 2 or 3, 4 years out of that guy, and that's all we really need. You really only got to focus on these next 2 or 3 years before you start paying the Joe Burrows and the Jamar Chases and the T. Higgins. That's when your money really starts to get a little bit tighter. So it makes a lot of sense to me if they said, we still want to play in the 25-year-old James Daniels, Austin Corbett range, but we also probably could bring in a guy like a Jensen or an Andrew Norwell or a Laken Tomlinson, guys that are 30, 31, and still get 2 or 3 years out of them to really maximize this window. So it's kind of hard. My the normal self in me that's got a little bit of doubt about the way the Bengals approach free agency, even though they're starting to erode that a little bit, makes me think they won't go for the big name guys. It also makes me think they won't go for the guys that are 30 and up. But maybe that changes, and I'm excited to see if it does.
Yeah, I think it should change because there's a balance here. And it's a balance that they have to strike because of where they're at, because of who the quarterback is. And the odds of them finding 3 25 to 27-year-old offensive linemen in their prime in free agency right now, it's just going to be really hard to do that and do it while staying within budget and doing all of these things. But if they get guys that can be quality linemen for 2 years, and then they start drafting better offensive linemen starting now, maybe with the 31st pick, maybe in round 2, round 3, it goes hand in hand. And that's the thing. I think a lot of us, me included, focused on free agency. If you really want to preserve Joe Burrow and keep him upright and have the offensive line and really the offense that we all envision, you're going to have to hit it big on 2 levels here. Free agency for the immediate, and then you got to get that pipeline churning with guys. And they like Jackson Carman and they like Deontay Smith and Trey Hill. And that, maybe one of those guys works out, maybe 2 of those guys work out. But I think it goes hand in hand there. Let's stick with free agency before we go into the draft. As far as some of those guys you named, James Daniels, I remember back on Locked On Bengals when I would have you on, we talked about him pre-draft. It was the Billy Price draft. The Bengals didn't like him pre-draft, I think because of size issues, and they were desperate for a center. And well, it turns out that James Daniels is a really, really good guard. Is that who you'd go after? This guard option? Because again, I don't think they're swimming in the Brandon Scherff waters. Maybe they do. But Austin Corbett, by the way, a guy I covered in Cleveland that was considered a 2nd-round bust, got traded to the Rams and is kind of remolded his career, and it looks like he's going to get paid. So you personally, who stands out? Who would you potentially target in this free agent group?
Yeah, it's funny to start with the Rams guys too, because they also have a center in Brian Allen, who was in, I believe that's the same draft, also Billy Price draft, where he's just an average kind of guy all around. The hard part with signing anyone from that Rams offensive line or really evaluating them is the scheme works, man. It is a heavy play action. Ball comes out quickly otherwise. So they're going empty like the Bengals. They're going wide zone. They're going play action. You get a lot of non-true drop back situations. And when they did is when you see Corbett look a little bad. It's when you see Brian Allen look his worst. And so I think both guys are decent run blockers, but they really get hit in that scheme. And that it may be a good scheme fit, but is that worth $8 to $10 million a year for either one of those guys? Even though because they're 25, you're going to pay a little bit more because the next 4 years of that contract should be their best years. You look at how, if you use like PFF, look how offensive linemen are graded. The top guys are older guys. Offensive line is a slow developing position, the way the NFL and college game is split up right now. So I think looking to get a guy, if you're just judging James Daniels off his age 21 to 25 years, I would understand why you'd have some issues. But I think those next 4 years, if you were to sign him, is when he's going to look really, really good and he's going to look his best. And he would be the guy I would target. That doesn't mean he's the best guard in this free agent class. It may be Laken Tomlinson from the 49ers at left guard, who I think is a tremendous run blocker, nasty, powerful dude, glass eater type dude. Doesn't get into the true drop back situations and passing because of the 49ers heavy play action scheme as well. But I think immediate upgrade at left guard. But again, he's a guy that's going to be 30 when this year kicks off. And will the Bengals play in that range? So I don't think that's too old for him. I think he should, the way he's built, the way he plays, how durable he's been, Tomlinson says, should be fine for the next 3 or 4 years of his next deal. But yeah, I would go for Daniels. Why? Because I think he gives you length, which they don't have. He would give you the athleticism, which you don't have. He's really heady and smart for the stunts and twists. I think it's a big issue the Bengals have had in the middle and picking up blitzes and picking up guys from other angles and from different spots. Daniels looks really good on tape when I watch him doing that. So I would go for Daniels first. But again, if it was me and my plan, it would be at the same time going for a 30-plus-year-old and going for a 25-year-old at the same time and trying to acquire two of those guys, because that's the other part. You alluded to it. The NFL is so hungry for offensive linemen. Every team needs at least one. Mm-hmm. These guys go fast. If you're projecting the Bengals to get 3 of these guys that we like, it's not happening. Why? Because these other teams are going to be involved, and they're going to be able to pick their spots of where they want to go. And while the Bengals may seem like a free agent destination, being this close to the Super Bowl, it's situation, it's money, it's where did the guy grow up, where does he want to live? All these other things come into play. And I think if you can get 2 of them, and if you pick the right 2, if it's a Ryan Jensen who's on the older side, and then James Daniels, man, you have upgraded center and right guard, which could be a huge boost to this offense.
What if because you said where they grow up, and so I'll tie in the local tie here, because I think it's realistic to land or to land. I just hinted at who I'm going after or who I'm talking about here, but Ryan Jensen and James Daniels. But a guy like Andrew Norwell, who's from here, has family here, could that be the exception to that rule of 3 because it is going to be hard to get 3. But if you're telling me that's the interior next year, from left to right, you get Norwell, you get Jensen, you get Daniels. I mean, holy smokes, that's much different. And I know Norwell isn't as athletic; he doesn't move necessarily, but he's at least going to be able to protect Burrow better than what they had there last year.
He's still a tremendous pass protector at left guard, and if you would have had him in the Super Bowl, you probably don't get beat as quickly. No offense, Quentin Spain. I mean, but Spain had a very good bounce back year. For what he showed last year to this year. And, without him, they probably don't have the success they had this year because of the issues they had at the other guard spot. I respect to Spain, but if it was Norwell, because he is so good in pass pro still at his age, then I would be for that. And I don't think he'll get a lot of money because of that.
I don't either.
He's not a scheme fit for everyone. You alluded to also his athleticism. That has eroded a little bit. He's not a wide zone type guy anymore. But you know what? He's still a veteran. He's a heady player. And again, really, really a brick wall in pass protection. So I would be for that. It's kind of funny because once you get the two guys, so like Daniels and Jensen, I think are week 1, maybe first 2 days type of signings, in free agency. Norwell's more of a week 2. I think Riley Reef, Quentin Spain, more of week 3. So you have your waves to target these guys. You've got to get them in the right tier. We've done free agency tiers the last few years, remember? And we'll probably do that again. And if you hit the right tier and you can cascade it in the right way, you can attack all of these spots and still end up with if you have to end up that third guy being a Reef or a Spain, that makes sense to me. And, if you can solidify 3 of these spots, maybe that includes cutting of Trey Hopkins, that may happen for the price he's being paid. Then right tackle leaves your one hole. And is that the pick at 31? Is that the pick in round 2? Is that a competition? Is it a Riley Reef plus a rookie? I could see a lot of different options going that way too.
Yeah, the vibe at the combine was that Trey Hopkins is going to get cut because of the money. And who knows? Maybe he's like, hey, maybe I like Cincinnati. I'm going to stay for $2 or $3 million or something like that. But at the same time, maybe he just goes elsewhere for the same price and would not be shocked. And it frees up. I mean, that's half of what you're going to pay Ryan Jensen, right? If around that, if that's what you do, and it makes it much easier to add a second guy, James Daniels, along with, a Ryan Jensen or something like that. Before we get to some under the radar guys, and we're going to get to other positions, I'm going to bother Joe here for a bit. So thanks for watching. This will be one of our longer videos. I got to ask you about the Laramie Tunsil trade and the possibility of that, because to me, that's like the dark horse. That's like the thing in the room. If he's available, 27 years old, elite pass blocker, the 31st pick, yeah, it's valuable, but I don't think it's immovable. And I feel the Bengals will view it that way. Frank Pollock said that they're not going to rule out moving Jonah Williams. And I only think they would move Jonah Williams from left tackle to probably right tackle in this scenario, as if they landed in their prime stud left tackle. He's under contract for the next 2 years. Do you think that's even on the Bengals' radar? Obviously, it takes 2 to tango, and we'll see if Houston even wants to move him. But to me, if Orlando Brown could have been had, and I get that was a different situation, to me, I think Laramie Tunsil's a better player. I think he would be a better fit anyways. And the Chiefs are able to land Orlando Brown. He's going to get tagged in Kansas City if they don't get a long-term deal done. But Laramie Tunsil, I would certainly be all ears if they're willing to move him down in Houston.
And I think that's the kind of veteran they would like to acquire if they were to do it. We were around when the Cordy Glenn trade happened. While that didn't work out for them for various reasons, the trade was a good idea. The situation was good. We praised it at the time because you got a guy that, the bonuses are already paid. Same with Tunsil. Instead of a $26 million cap hit, it's only going to be an $18 million cap hit for the next 2 years if you take him, which is reasonable for a guy who's a top 5 pass protector. And he missed a lot of time last year. But we've seen before, similar to how Trent Williams didn't want to go back to Washington. It seemed like Tunsil, wanted no part of that Houston and forced.
It was a thumb injury. Yeah, it was a thumb.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Right. So you can tell there that something was going on. I would think if the Bengals were picking 15, you wouldn't even consider it. But because of, how they value their picks, we know this. But 31, you're right, is a different beast. That is basically a second round pick. And, you're going to get the same tier of guys after like 25, 20 in this draft. 25 through 50, probably the same kind of guy, unless someone really falls that you love. I would be for it. It's a 2-year deal currently. You might even extend him and fan out those cap hits and make it even more digestible for the next few years. But I'm with that 100%. If they did that, in my opinion, there's no single boost to this offensive line that would be greater than Tunsil. And I say that because I think moving Jonah to right tackle at that time, you have solidified both tackle spots, and you could still go out and spend year one cash on a guard or a center. Like signing Armstead probably hurts you from signing another offensive lineman. Training for Tunsil does not hurt you for signing a free agent offensive lineman. So I think it's two-folded there. But why I'd rather have Tunsil over everyone, and if they could do it, now again, the loss there is not having that 31st pick. In an ideal world, sign 3 good offensive linemen, use that 31st pick at corner or defensive tackle, and you move on, you make your team stronger throughout. But we're talking about the offensive line for a reason. And I think the best way or the strongest way to address it would be that scenario of trading it for Tunsil.
Yeah, agreed. And it would, Wow, it would be wild. I also think the Bengals, what they would do is they would be willing to part with 31 and part with maybe even another pick.
Mhm.
They would want to pick back a lower pick, and that would be the interesting part of it. And I know that was part of the Orlando Brown construction of his deal. And the only reason I'm comparing it is because it was last year and it was a left tackle, and the Chiefs were in a similar position that the Bengals are in of trying to revamp that offensive line. Before we switch gears and talk about the rest of the roster, are there any other free agents, and I'll probably bother you before the draft so we can focus more on the draft, but are there any other under the radar offensive line free agents that the Bengals should be interested in that maybe, Frank Pollock is going to be watching and says, oh, that's a glass eater versus, us and the average fan not really paying attention or just under the radar guys that you have your eye on?
Yeah, I've gotten down to the restricted free agents. Two of them, one for the Lions, replaced our boy Frank Ragnow, the long lost non-Bengal in another universe, right? Frank Ragnow. He replaced him when Ragnow went down. And I don't think they missed much of a beat. Ragnow's a top 2 or 3 center in the NFL right now. But Evan Brown, who's restricted, same draft class as Billy Price. Both guys I'm going to talk about are same draft class because that's, how free agency works 4 years later. But he's restricted because he didn't play enough games, I believe, in year 2. And because of it, the way he played, I don't think you're going to give him a tender for a first-round pick. That's what the Lions have to decide. Do they want to give him a tender that would pay him, I think, $5 million for a first-round pick, $3.5 million for a second-round pick, or the original draft position tender? And he was undrafted. So if they do a low-round tender like that, the Bengals can sign him, and the Lions would have an opportunity to match his deal. Works for the other guy I'm going to talk about, Ryan Bates, as well, how restricted free agents work. If the Lions do not match it, because the Bengals offer $3.5 million a year or whatever for either one of these guys, which would be relatively cheap given their experiences, the Bengals would not have to give up a pick in order to acquire this player. But Evan Brown, in his 780 snaps or whatever it was last year, because he played most of the year, 9 pressures, 1 sack, according to PFF. When I watched his tape, I thought he moved really well. It made me go up and look his combine testing and his pro day testing. I believe he's a 93rd percentile athlete. So you want some athleticism? Frank Pollock talked about that as well. He's good in pass protection. Inexperience is his issue. He's coming from SMU, smaller school, and then he didn't play for 3 years, really, outside of a handful of snaps here and there. So really, that's a guy that could be on the cusp, on the rise, 25-year-old. The other one is Ryan Bates from Buffalo. He's also an interior. He's a guard guy from Penn State, 90-something percentile athlete as well. Didn't play as much the last 3 years. And then this year, when they were looking for a guard to step in, they really needed to solidify their offensive line because they were having major issues halfway through the year. They plugged him in at left guard, and Ryan Bates played really well. And only 350 snaps, so even half what Evan Brown did. But again, we're talking about a guy that they can't give him a first or second round tender because he's not worth that. But if you could get him now, talking $3 million a year, it's hard for that other team to match it when you will probably start him when these other teams are bringing those guys back as backups, more than likely.
Let's switch gears. And it is interesting, right? If they could do that and get those under the rate, because that to me would be almost the perfect storm, low cost, like a draft pick, but you don't have as many growing pains because they've learned how to become NFL players and in their athletes and their everything. I mean, that would be awesome because it fits the win now 25-year-old mentality that you should have with Joe Burrow and Jessie Bates and all these guys that are in their mid-20s that are ready to win now. I want to talk defense, but first, just finishing up on the offense free agency wise, tight end has been a big position that's been talked about. CJ Uzomah is a free agent. Do you anticipate them re-signing him? What do you think about the idea of Rob Gronkowski, who flirted with Joe Burrow before the Super Bowl? There was a report from Pro Football Focus earlier this week about an agent of a prominent tight end. And I don't think they said who, and maybe you saw who, I didn't. But he wants his client to play, he or she, I should say, wants his client to play with Joe Burrow. So to me, with all these tight ends out there, I think the Bengals could certainly upgrade that spot in free agency, and they might be able to do it at maybe a better price than some realize or anticipate right now, because some of these guys might not get signed and scooped up as quickly as they anticipate. What would you do at the tight end spot this offseason?
It is a strong free agent class of tight ends. I mean, I think in a normal year, Mike Gesicki should break the bank somewhere. I think he's a tremendous player. And then even a guy like CJ Uzomah coming off a career year, what is that worth? When you see, I can't remember the guy's name for the Panthers, and Justine Thomas just got signed, and you look at what he gets, and it's like, oof,
a lot of money.
Is this what we're getting already? He looks,
yeah.
I looked at his numbers and his stats and his grades from BFF, and like, he looks like when they extended Uzomah, 4 years ago. That's a very similar career path, and it makes sense because tight end is a slow developing position, much like offensive line. That when those guys are 26 years old after their first contract's done, you're just now seeing what they're going to be for the next 3 or 4 years. And I think the Bengals banked on that with Uzomah, and they were actually very correct on it. But now do you give them a third contract? How do tight ends develop? How do they age after that second contract? I was looking that up as well. It's not very pretty unless you are like a Zach Ertz, a Rob Gronkowski, one of those athletic, really good guys, upper echelon athletes. I'm not sure CJ Uzomah is that guy. It's hard to even talk about this because Uzomah, what he did, and, fan favorite, he turned into that. He was the hype man of this run. It's hard to say that, they could upgrade at that position, but it's actually easy to say because they can. And there are a lot of guys out there in free agency. And that's not even getting to the draft, which I think there's a lot of athletes in mid rounds, but they're going to take 2 or 3 years before they're that guy. So do you have that time? And the other part of tight end conversation is when you've already invested in 3 wide receivers and running back, obviously tight end is going to fall behind. Yeah, that's your 5th option in a lot of ways. How much can you invest in that? How much can you throw at that position? Having said that, if they're willing to, because they're probably going to pocket $10 million at the end of this cap run, right? At the end of this year.
No, they cannot do that, Joe. No.
Right. But if they don't, then great. But if the decision is, all right, fine, we'll bring this tight end in and spend $7-8 million on him, which is, I think CJ Uzomah could. He made $6 million last year. He could get $7 or $8 million in the open market. If he's seen as a locker room culture guy, that's the other part too. These guys get poached by teams that want to win and don't know how to set that locker room and that establish that culture. They'll see Uzomah as a guy who helped do that in Cincinnati and are willing to pay him, despite the production ups and downs of his career. Where I think the Bengals could be in a situation where, do they go throw $7 million at Rob Gronkowski? Is that even worth it for a guy that you probably have to manage his snaps a little bit? Tremendous run blocker still a productive player, but you still have to probably manage him a little bit there, and you'd like to probably back or upgrade that second tight end spot from Drew Sample. So. Long-winded answer of saying, I don't know, but I'd feel it out on everyone. I'd be interested in upgrading tight end, but it can't be like a Gesicki can't happen because that future years, that money has to go towards the receiver position and extending those guys. So it's got to be somebody that either you get cheap that has upside, maybe an OJ Howard if he can stay healthy, or a more of a veteran that can just come in and do what you need him to do for now. I like Tyler Conklin from Minnesota, really good blocker. When he had to play, he was decently productive. I don't think he's going to break the bank. I think he helps your run game, and he gives you that outlet you need. It doesn't have to be a number 1, 2, or 3 target. He can be your number 5 target.
Yeah, that's an interesting name. And that's the thing. There's just so many of them. And I'm going to be interested to see what Uzomah commands, because you're right. I could see him making, signing a 3-year, $24 million deal with the team. I could also see him being on the market in week 2. And it's just like, these other David Njoku got scooped up and, Gesicki probably gets tagged, but who knows, right? And all these different guys. Last thing on tight ends, and then I want to get to the defense. To me, if you get Gronk or you can get Gronk, you have a conversation with Uzomah and you say, look, we want both of you. Let's try to make this work because you've built something here. Because you're right. Rob Gronkowski is not a 17-game, every regular season game player. He's not going to play, every stat. He's just not that guy anymore. But where did the Bengals? Exactly. Where did the Bengals struggle in the playoffs? And a lot of that had to do with the offensive line, but they struggled in the red zone. I think he would make them so much better in the red zone and be able to make game-changing plays with games on the line when you need a play. And so is there a way where you can do both? And obviously he helps in the run game as well. And he's a great blocker. And if he wants to play with Joe Burrow, can you get Gronk and can you get CJ? Both are great personalities. It's going to be great in the locker room. It will be awesome, right? But how good is that tight end room now? I mean, the upside there with Gronk and then the steadiness of Uzomah, I think they'd be set there and it would be a position of strength instead of a outside of CJ, they don't have anybody that's capable of doing anything in the passing game when they need them to.
Yeah, that is part of it. But can you spend that much? I mean, are we talking if Gronk gets 6, 7? I mean, maybe he just comes as the last year deal, last contract of his career, and it's $5 million, $8 million, whatever in that range, though. But can you spend another $5 million on Uzomah? You probably could, but it means you're probably taking a little bit of money off another position. But again, I think that gives them a strength on that roster where when they had to bring in Sample last year, or when Sample had to play, it was an issue. You could clearly see defenses did not care about him at all. I even thought his run blocking at times was poorer than it should have been for a guy that's supposed to be, a good run blocker, or at least supposed to have developed into that. So yeah, it turns a weakness into a strength if you do that. I also think if you signed a Gronkowski, maybe that pushes you to draft a guy in round 2 or round 3 that is an athletic upgrade. He starts to play early. He rotates with Gronk. You learn from Gronk. You can still use Sample a little bit as the guy develops. And I think that gives you a cheap option that also gives you, what they eventually probably need anyways. Even if you sign Uzomah or Gronk or any guy that's 29, 30 or plus, you're probably still going to want to draft a guy for that next 3 years.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. And that's really how I expect them to approach the offensive line anyways, right? Is they're going to be older in one of these spots and you're going to want to draft someone or develop. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about the defense. And the defense is different because I think it's a lot of re-signing their own. So I'm going to just be broad with this, Joe. Who would you really, really try to re-sign and do, what it takes to get them back? Who are you prioritizing? Because they can't keep everybody. They have a lot of free agents we know Jessie Bates. You want to get a deal done. So we'll take him out of it. They're going to tag him, worst case. But outside of Jessie Bates, who are you prioritizing in free agency?
Then I guess it's BJ Hill. And I know they've got some solid contributors, all throughout that could probably be signed or extended. I think Eli Apple is a conversation. But I think to me, it's Hill over Ogunjobi. Number one, he's healthier right now. You may have to wait. Ogunjobi may have to wait a while until he can work out for teams or show teams that he's healthy. And that's just how kind of frequency goes a lot of the time. But to be honest with you, even though Ogunjobi had his 7 sacks, I feel like he was the exact same player he's been the last couple of years in Cleveland. And maybe it got overshadowed a little bit, or they got frustrated with his inconsistent play style. But that's who he was here. We remember the splash plays. We remember, him adding that first step in the inside, which when he was out, they really didn't have it. So I think we have overinflated Ogunjobi a little bit. At the same time, I think he ends up with a 1-year, $6 million deal again somewhere. And that's fine. I would take him back at that rate. But at the same time, I think BJ Hill is going to command more of a long-term deal. I think other teams will be interested in BJ Hill. He's a better run defender than Larry Ogunjobi, while adding enough of a pass rush that you don't have to take him off the field. We're not talking about less of the DJ Raider where you want to take him off in your nickel pass rush or things like that. BJ Hill can be your 4th pass rusher of the 4. The problem is they didn't have a number 3 last year either. So, it was Hubbard and Hendrickson. If they get back Osai and it's Osai and Hendrickson on the edge, or they draft a guy or they add a guy and then it's Hubbard kicking inside with Hill, I think you're good. I also think you can keep BJ Hill, give him a 3-year, $7-8 million a deal, 3-year, $24 million. They love the 3-year, $21 million type structure. It seemed like they handed out to everyone last year and a couple of years ago too with Preston Brown and Bobby Hart. And let's not go back down that one. But so I think they can give that again to a BJ Hill and draft a 3-tech, whether that be at 31, whether that be in round 2, 3, 4. I think that is a need for them to find an athlete on the inside at D tackle that they can develop for the next few years. So I would do Hill first. I would let Ogunjobi sit. If the market doesn't, really reward him for his productive season, and the market's very similar to what it was last year, I'm open to bringing him back at the same rate he was last year. The interesting one is Eli Apple, because I do think they want to get better at corner. You're going to be paying 4 out of the 5 players in your secondary veteran decent deals at this point, with Jessie Bates getting 12, if not more. 12 is at least the cap. Von Bell's getting a contract. You've got Mike Hilton getting paid. You got Chidobe Awuzie getting paid. How much can you pay that other guy? And I know they're on the hook for Trey Waynes, but it always felt like this was going to be an out year, even when they signed him, right? You always kind of this would come off the books at this point. So can you, and will they go out and spend $8 to $10 to $12 million on that other corner. I don't think they are. I think that's a candidate for, okay, Eli Apple, you've been, surviving on 1-year deals for the last 3 years now, it seems. Do you want a 2-year at $8 million deal, $4 million a year, where you can hot starter, and we're going to draft a guy to develop into that spot where maybe that's the 31st pick and that guy plays. Maybe it's the second round and that guy develops and sits behind Apple and Uzomah. You're going to need 4 corners. You're going to need 5 corners. How many years have we looked at the Bengals get that far down in the depth chart? So I don't think paying Apple that much is unreasonable, because he started, fit the scheme, and played well enough that if he's your weak link and he's the one guy in the secondary that really isn't, holding his own in his spot, they were able to scheme around it and help their defense. Doesn't mean I don't want to upgrade from that. And that's why I would still consider spending the 31st or a second round pick and really prioritize getting a young, more athletic, more man cover type guy, because I think that would complete their secondary.
Yeah, it's tough because you have all this balance. You want to balance that with the offensive line and adding that, and then the idea of potentially adding Gronk versus or any of those tight ends, right? Versus upgrading at corner and still keeping Apple, because you could keep Apple if it's 2 years, $8 million. You could do that and then also sign someone, but then it takes away elsewhere, and that's the balance that I'm interested in seeing what they do, because they clearly prioritize corner. They always have. They're willing to draft them early. Haven't done it in a while, and that's why they had to go out and spend like they did, and it worked. And so do they go with Apple in a pick, or do they go try to find the next Cheeto, the next Mike Hilton? And instead of going after Wayne's probably should have got the deal that Uzomah got, looking back at it anyways. It was crazy money at the time, and it was funny money, and they were just trying to get someone in here. I think we could admit that now. But they spent a lot on corner last year, and I think they're comfortable doing that if they get that type of result. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if, they say, all right, Eli, much like Ogunjobi, let's see if anybody else is interested in you. Because I don't know. I don't know how many teams are going to want that, average starting corner or something, of that realm that comes with the Twitter crap. Because I do think that matters, and that impacts whether or not insert a team. The Vikings want to deal with that, or whoever would potentially be interested in Eli Apple. So, he might not have much of a market. And so you might be able to keep him for cheap, and then also go out and get a veteran that they really like. So that balance is going to be interesting to me.
You know who I would really like? I don't know, like a 1 year, and you're still going to draft a guy. I think Casey Hayward would be a tremendous fit. In a zone, through a 3 deep cover zone, and throughout his career, basically, but with the Raiders last year, and he was still really good. And he got like a 1 year, $6.5 million deal. I think he's probably in line for that again. And if you're going to spend, $4 million on Apple, might as well spend a little bit more, get a guy who's still really good. I mean, the Bengals had their struggles with him the 2 times they played him and played the Raiders. I think he's still a very good player. And if you spent veteran money on all 5 of those guys, man, that secondary instantly goes from, we felt good about it last year, but we always knew Apple would be the guy somebody would target, right? And it kind of happened in the Super Bowl. You'll hear offenses try to, everyone calls it something different, but find the dummy is what we always called it. And you find the one guy you can pick on in that secondary. And we knew it'd be Apple when they got down there, and it was. But they also attacked Von Bell a little bit at that safety spot, that no-look pass. I mean, they were targeting him that time. So, you really strengthen it if you were to add a veteran corner at that other spot. And then at that point, maybe they are targeting Bell, but those are different targets than targeting corner on the boundary on the outside. And I think that just raises everyone on defense.
I talked to someone at the combine, and they threw out this idea, and I'm just going to run it by you, because the past couple of years, and we talked about it at the top, Trey Hendrickson in his prime, they spend big money, 4 years, $60 million. The year prior, DJ Reader in his prime, they spend big money making the highest paid nose tackle in the NFL. They clearly are willing to spend on defense if you feel like it's this game-changing type talent. And I think there is one of those guys that could hit the market, and we'll see if he gets tagged. I'm not sure if the Patriots are going to do it or not. But J.C. Jackson is set to become a free agent, 26 years old. Really great cover corner, right? By all accounts. Would you? That obviously means that you're not going to be able to go break the bank on offense. Again, break the bank. It doesn't mean they can't improve the offensive line. How shocked would you be? Would you swim in those waters at all? Or are you not even entertaining that idea? Because that's going to cost. I mean, that's going to be Trey Wayne's money plus probably a couple million more to get a guy like J.C. Jackson here in town.
Yeah, and heavy cash. That's the big difference of like when they signed a Hendrickson and a DJ Reader is they didn't have to put a lot of guaranteed money on those guys. Mostly because I think people were concerned with the 1 year for Hendrickson. Will he develop? Will he keep that pace up? Which he definitely had. He got $60 million total from the Bengals. He gets $60 million guaranteed if you're the free agent this year after 2 years of back-to-back of what he did, which would put him out of the historically Bengals price range. DJ Reader being a nose tackle didn't get a lot of guaranteed money because he's a nose tackle. Corner will, right? Corner will get that money. That contract will be big. The guaranteed money will be huge. So I would be shocked. But, man, I'd be for it. Oh, yeah, I'd be for it. J.C. Jackson's good. He's really good. And what that would do, we talk about just raising the level. You're adding that. He's probably your best player, even with Jessie Bates, if you were to add a J.C. Jackson in your secondary. But, that's also the other part to bring up Bates is that when they signed these guys, when they spent the money at corner last year, it was almost a one-for-one trade of what they would have spent on William Jackson. When they signed Trey Hendrickson, it was almost one-for-one trade of what they would have spent on Carl Lawson. This year is the draft of when if you would have hit on Billy Price, you'd be extending Billy Price, right? And so maybe that means they're willing to spend 4 years, $40 million on the offensive line to bring in a starter. For that money would have been towards the pick you would have made, the investment you would have made. So on defense, maybe that big price tag is the Jessie Bates, right? Maybe that's the 25-year-old in his prime that you feel is a playmaker and is good. And I understand why that would be their big signing, and because he probably would get the most money. If he wasn't on the Bengals and they signed to Jessie Bates, we'd throw a parade. So, I mean, yeah, I'm all for a J.C. Jackson, but I also would understand their logic if they thought, that's Bates this year.
Yeah, no, I think it is a bit pie in the sky, but thinking about that defense playing at that level, and it is also worth noting, Von Bell is in the last year of his deal as well. So you could say, all right, well, we'll get younger at that other safety spot. And maybe that's a contender for the 31st pick or, round 2, round 3 as well. So it's a juggling act. And that's the fun part about free agency now is for years and years and years, Joe, we've talked about, oh, well, they should do this or they should do this or this. Well, now it feels like, at least to a degree, those things are possible because they have been aggressive. And it's going to be fun to watch it. Any final thoughts here? Anything that I missed on? Because it's an exciting time. And I think hopefully Mike Brown realizes that for the first time, honestly, in franchise history, they can be a perennial Super Bowl contender because they've never been that. They've won the division back-to-back times just once in 54 seasons, 81, 82. They've never gone deep in the playoffs back-to-back years where, it ends in losing in the Super Bowl. It's been 81, 88, 30-year drought. So to me, I think they need to take advantage of it. I think they know that, and hopefully they do, because if not, well, people like me and you are going to be pretty critical.
Yeah, because remember, we covered the team from 11 to 15 when that team was really good and that roster was really good. And we would say, if you guys want to pocket $10 million and roll over $10 million in cap space, you could probably go sign a center. You could probably go sign another pass rusher. You could probably go sign a linebacker or a corner, whatever it was at the time, because they were pretty stacked, but they limped into the playoffs in many of those years. And where you need that depth, you need that extra guy, you need that little bit more spent. And they never pushed the cap. They never maximized it. They never really stretched that roster as far as it could go. And maybe some of that's Mike Brown, obviously. Some of that may have been Marvin Lewis, who seemed kind of anti-new players a lot of times, whether it be through the draft or free agency, where I don't think they get that. Sometimes when you get two guys that are maybe anti or with the same mindset, it's easier for them to bypass free agency. But ever since Zach came in, and ever since it seemed like Duke Tobin took more of a charge, and Blackburn's more, have more of a say in how they attack and how they build. It does feel like even if Mike Brown still, is the same mindset, even realizing the window they're in, they at least it feels the way they get pushed or they don't have someone supporting his idea, they get, well, we can add this guy, or we can bring in this guy, we can sign this guy. And that is maybe all it takes to really maximize this roster and this cap space. And I'm with it. And it's an exciting time. And I'm excited to see if they actually do it. Man, if they step through that window in an aggressive way, you see the way the city supported this run and the way that, how Bengals fans flocked out of nowhere. And I think the country were really interested in how the Bengals were and how they were built and how they were playing and the story. I think if they nailed free agency and came out swinging, you would feel very same sentiment, not just within Bengals fans in the city, but from the NFL.
For sure. It's an opportunity they have to take advantage of. We'll see if they do it. Make sure you follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Goodberry. Great stuff from him. And I kept you longer than I anticipated, but it was really good stuff, man. I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me, James.